Okay, it's the top of the hour, so let's get started. Let me start sharing the screen. And just minimize this so that I can see. Go presentation mode. So welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining this third meeting of our study groups. Well, fourth, we had the joint session, but third, which is purely GCP related. And today's topic are inspections. So just to note, the meeting recordings are available about a week after the meeting. Lydia confirmed she posted already the recording for last week's meeting. So again, in a week, you will find the recording of this one. Again, few reminders about the exam writing. Klaus, Ham, would you like to take this over? I don't have to be reciting it all the time. And Klaus, you are muted.
Yeah. So as most of you might know, so the exam frame itself is 24th to the 26th of April, 2025. And it will be around 165 multiple choice questions. And 15 of those will not be scored. So in total, you will have 3.5 hours, which means approximately 1.5 minutes per question, which might sound a little bit daunting for some of you, but I mean, often it's really just a statement and you make your choice, as you can see when you prepare for those exam questions. So it sounds very feasible. Additional time can be purchased by candidate whose first language is other than English. And we also recommend this because sometimes when you read those questions, you really need to think it through to make the right decision. So sometimes a couple of additional hours are really helpful, especially if English is not your kind of native language or a language you often really speak. The practice exam is now free of charge, so we really encourage you to really go onto SQA and really look for those exam questions and really using those to really prepare yourself.
Thank you. Let me just add one thing. You won't know which questions are not scored.
Okay.
So take every question seriously. As for the additional time, that's $50, and it's 1 hour if you are in the testing center and 2 hours if you are doing it online.
Okay. So then in terms of the scope of the exam, obviously FDA 21 CFRs that are relevant for, in our case, good clinical practices like informed consent, financial disclosure, and all those typical CFRs that really apply to clinical trials. Then ICH E6, and for this year still, since we have really no indication right now when, for example, FDA will adopt ICH E6R3, it will continue to be ICH E6R2. Not sure whether everybody is aware, but for example, EMA already announced an adoption date, which I think will be the 23rd of July this year. But since we really need to make sure that we have a more globalized adoption, we still will basically exam based on ICH E6R2. And then third, 21 CFR Part 11, which deals with validation of computerized systems, electronic signatures, etc., etc. It is definitely recommended by us that you thoroughly read the candidate handbook. That is also a free resource on SQA, on the sqa.org website. Familiarize yourself really truly with the regulations that apply to that exam. Read the preamble so that you understand the scope of the application of those regulations, and then really think the questions through from a most conservative approach to those regulations. Then there are also a couple of tips which we have hyperlinked into the slides. So really take your time and also look at those, because they might be really helpful and give you a little bit more security, perhaps for some of the questions and the exam itself.
Yes, there are tips. Different people are saying how they prepared, how they found the exam, and many of them say, compared to the practice exam, it's a totally different story. People feel the real one is much more difficult. So don't take it like I passed the practice exam in no time, 100% score, and you think you are perfect. You may be surprised when you see the real questions. So the practice exam is a kind of out of date. Take it with reservations, but still it's a good feel how it is having the timer and so on and so forth.
So obviously 165 questions is really a lot. And so really test yourself perhaps with those practice exams to really see how long it actually takes you to really answer questions kind of from an average perspective. And even if you're English speaking and you feel you really need more time than 1.5 minutes per question, think about potentially buying more time for yourself. Read carefully through the questions. Some of them really you have to pay attention to the individual wording because it might lead you to a different response. So really carefully read those questions and spend some time and think those questions through. And as mentioned, really think those through from the most conservative interpretation to the regulations. And if a question looks very long, skip it, come back. So it's always possible to really jump back and forth so that you don't really waste too much time on a question. Go to those questions, answer those that really come easy to you, and then go back and really take those questions that sound a little bit more tougher. Pay attention to your time, because I mean, it sounds a lot of time, but really when you dive into those questions, sometimes get stuck. Really make sure that you pay attention and really so that you don't really lose yourself. And at the end, you only have a couple of minutes left for the last remaining 20 questions, which simply is not enough. And sometimes you guess. Obviously, we are sometimes unsure about responses, etc. But really take your time, read through the questions. If you're unsure, skip it, come back, but really pay attention to the questions and their specific wording.
And to the answers as well, because there might be some matches and mismatches. So you may read one of the answer options and you can see, oh, this is really a mismatch. You may read another one and say, this might be, and you may narrow it down to, let's say, 2 possible answers. If you keep being unsure which one to choose, guess. You have 50% chance you get it right. And then it's better definitely than not answering it.
And then, as mentioned before, pay attention to really how the questions or how kind of a statement or scenario is really worded. Look for keywords in those and really think about whether you remember those keywords from one of the CFRs that apply, ICH 6, etc. And remember that some of the definitions amongst those regulations are really not the same. So when you prepare for the exam, really think about definitions also. Apply logic. Most questions have really 2 answers that are clearly incorrect, as Camilla already said, but there are also answers that are partially correct or really sound really correct to you. So really pay attention and use your logic and use the best based on your experience, based on your remembrance of the regulation that apply. So those are a couple of recommendations. Choose a strategy that works for you. Flag difficult questions, skip them as mentioned, or really choose at the moment the best response that seems to be fitting for you, but also note this question and response down to potentially go back if you still have time and really think about it one more time before you make your final decision. And then last but not least, please do not guess. I mean, really use your knowledge from the regulations, use your experience, and make those best choices based on those two things.
Yeah, second guessing on answers is not a good idea.
Mm.
Sometimes when I'm answering some quiz or something, I go back and then I start thinking, is it really so? And most of the time, I got it right the first time. And then I start rethinking and rethinking and rethinking, and I make a wrong choice. That happens to everyone. So don't fall in this trap and just, sometimes it's just a kind of instinctive correct answer that fits. And also one more thing, as you are going through the questions, then there might be some other question that will give you a hint for a previous one for the correct answer. So just pay attention. And welcome then again to our meeting. Let's talk a little bit about inspections. There ICH E6 and any ICH guideline does not address regulatory inspections, which may be surprising, but if there is anything like in GCP, it relates to sponsor audit. So if don't try to find something about inspections in GCP, because it's more related to sponsors. For regulatory inspections, specifically for FDA, there is the BIMO Compliance Program Manual, and it has many parts. It's quite an extensive document. If I recall well, it's about 500 pages, and it keeps growing and getting bigger and bigger. But some parts are really important. IRBs, sponsors and CROs, clinical investigators, and sponsor investigator. These are the key ones. There might be something about other types of inspections. Remember, it's for inspectors to guide them through all types of inspections they may be doing. It's available free of charge. Some companies charge outrageous amount of money. I saw some organization selling it for about $1,000, which is ridiculous because it's a free resource. So ignore any kind of such tricks. And if you put it on the FDA website search engine, you should be able to find it. If you can't find it, we can provide it to you. I have a copy, and I'm happy to provide it as a resource, and you will have it in your resources in the study group connect page. So these processes are foundation for audits, how to handle audits and inspections. And there is a difference. All of you, any of you who has been through a client audit, this client most likely be a sponsoring organization, then you know it's quite different than if you were involved in a preparation for inspection and inspection itself. The communication is different, the behavior is different, the whole organization is different. For sponsor audits, there is no need to have the back room and the front room and a messenger running in between the two. You may even agree with a sponsor what they want to see and prepare those files upfront, while if there is an inspection, they should come to a clean table. And only those documents they request, they should get. In both inspections and audits, it's recommended to take notes. And the note keeping could be quite demanding. So have more than one note keeper, because it's really tough to record all the questions and all the answers that are being asked and that are being provided in answer. GCP tells us we should be inspection ready. So what does it mean? There should be a process behind it. Having an inspection SOP is a good start. How are we going to host an inspection? How are we going to prepare for the inspection? What kind of documentation? Who would be involved? And a very good training or learning tool are mock audits. Ideally, to have it like a very real feel, the mock inspector could be a contractor whom you don't know. And this person comes and you are not told it's mock inspection. You may even think it's real. That's the best. That's the best way how to learn. But even having it as a kind of role play, even if the mock inspector is your QA person, it still works. So use it, I would say, at least annually. And maybe if you are a fast-growing organization, every 6 months, because you may have new people and you want to be sure that they know what to do if an inspector comes. And many times they do not have to give you much time for preparation, especially if you are in the United States. Outside US, that's a different story. They need to travel, they need to be sure that there is somebody present when they arrive. So the announcement time is at least a month, sometimes more, but you may not have this luxury if you are in the States, and especially if you are part of a pharma or biotech company. If the inspector decides, they may simply come and show up without any pre-announcement. So always keeping good order. The trial master file, since we are talking about the GCP scope, training documentation, and qualification documents of people working on the study, investigation of product shipping records and the whole chain of custody, having a storyboard, how the IP moves, where it goes, who is involved. Let's say you use a depot. How is it going to be delivered to the depot? Who authorizes the first and the subsequent shipments? Is there automated tool, some IRT solution? If yes, is it properly validating? And any documentation related to import decisions. Please not emails. This is the worst place to put a decision because I can guarantee you would have very hard time to find that email, especially under the stress of the inspection in progress. And even if you are in a relaxed situation, try to find something, an important email toward the end of the study. If you have thousands and thousands and thousands of emails and the bad habits like not changing the subject of the email and things like that, or having long email chains, that's not a good idea.
Mila,
So
we had a question. Someone noted, please give examples of important decisions. And I think that you did give some of those. A lot of times, some examples, risk decisions. A lot of times I've seen things, it's like, oh, our SOP says we need to make this risk decision concerning a vendor, concerning moving forward with a project, going from maybe first in human, going from part A to part B based on safety assessments. So those things that are really important decisions should be documented and available. One thing that I also find during mock inspections is we know, clinical research, sometimes trials last for years and years, and study staff changes. And so starting with a mindset of quality to start with will allow you to have the processes in place to have these in good order, which could be 5 years down the road. So I think those important decisions that you're making from a clinical based, safety based, efficacy based, moving forward with a study are the ones that need to really be documented and not in email. You will never find anything in email again.
Yeah. Even things like you may have DSMB. So the DSMB decisions, if you have adaptive design and you have different paths, how the trial can move, then there is a decision which way is going to be used from now on based on the data analysis. Decisions like first authorization, investigation of product shipment, authorization for a site to destroy the unused IP locally. You may have a decision, there were some SOP updates, but it was close to the study end, so it was decided to finish the study using the basically outdated version of the SOP. This is possible. This can be done. It's based on the risk assessment. Vendor approvals, change of vendors, and so on and so forth. So many things, action items that you decide you need to take, and CAPAs and their closures, and so on and so forth. Which sites to audit? That's another important decision. Which sites not to audit? So moving to a different technology or upgrading a system. You have ECRF and there is a major upgrade. And you decide, yes, we go for it, or no, we are not going for that. So there are many decisions on all kinds of levels. So always have a good way documenting them. Good CAPA process for any findings. And if I want to make a finding, it doesn't matter if I'm auditing pharma affiliate, a vendor. In the root cause analysis and CAPA process, there is always something that is not done. Always. Either the root cause analysis ends up with something like human error or technical issue, which is very much on the surface instead of diving deep and why that issue occurred, or human error. Okay, if the person has done it 100 times correctly before, why now not correct? So there are all the whys that need to be answered, and maybe more than just 5. And different types of analysis that can be used for complex issues. So having very good root cause analysis, and then really CAPA goes to that true root cause and not to something if it stays on the surface and the CAPA is retraining, I can guarantee that that issue will come up again. You can take it for granted because people do not have amnesia unless they are very new to the company. They don't need really retraining if they have been doing it for 2, 3, 4 years. So retraining is not a panacea that can heal any kind of issue. And really, I would like you to remember that. Focusing on data handling, processing, integrity, making sure that all computer systems are documented. You have a list of systems that you are using and their validation status. If you get any 483, then you should reply within 15 calendar days. That's a short time. And FDA expects a thorough answer, not just something vague, but a thorough answer saying, this is what we are going to do. We are going to implement new process. Here, please find and attach the SOP for that process. This is what we expect from the SOP and process improvement to achieve. This is how it's going to be checked and measured. These KPIs or key quality indicators are going to be followed. There are so many warning letters saying, we found your response inadequate. So be really careful. If 483 is not the end of the world, it does not mean you need to stop the study. If you are halfway through, you just need to respond thoroughly and make true efforts for improvement. Responding in a timely manner, not with the timelines, although you can ask with justification for timeline prolongation. But I would use it really if it's something very much needed and it gives you the necessary time to give a perfect answer. Otherwise, if the inspectors or FDA are just getting the feel that you are only buying additional time, they may not take it. So let's go now to the practice exam. Would you?
Oh, yes. Yes, so you know an inspection is coming, and what do you need to do next? Assuming, you have been contemporaneously, managing all your records for a study as you should, then I agree with I agree with multiple things. You also, but I think I would go with the last one. You want to make sure there's a procedure in place, and that procedure should also take into account the inspections in terms of training. What they're going to be coming in to do based on their manual. But you want to make sure everyone knows how to conduct themselves during the inspection, and that puts people at ease if they know what is inspected of them, and they have a procedure kind of helping them.
Yeah, and they do the mock inspections, so they practice. It's not only that I read, and now I'm stressed and I can't remember. Practice is the key. So practice the mock inspections. Practice. One thing is inspection readiness, meaning all my documentation and so on and so forth. The other thing is inspection preparedness, meaning I know what I'm going to do, where I should be, how should I behave. And for that, I need to practice. So let me stop sharing. We have just few last minutes. So do you have any questions or inspection experience that you would like to share? We have a question, I think, in the chat. Is it valid to check ID, identity, or other documents inside to verify the existence of the participant, like in a clinical study? If this is collected in the first place, that depends on local regulations. I know countries where this is by default. A copy of the ID is taken and filed. And that comes from local regulations. I know in some other places what they do is they issue a study ID, where there could be a picture if the participant agrees, could be their code, and typically there is the contact number because it's also for the staff. And I saw it many times in the African research centers, and they were issuing this kind of ID documents, study ID documents for the participants. And it may sound funny, like, why on earth? But I've seen sites that recruited 3,500 participants in the vaccine study. So you can't remember them. And everybody was instructed from the site team also to have this ID card and to identify the participant to make sure it's the right participant for the study and not someone else. So again, and somewhere it's prohibited. Like in Europe, under GDPR, you would never, ever seen that, and you would be never provided. Pam, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I mean, if an inspector is looking to try to verify participants, IDs is one, they may take a picture of their driver's license. I've also seen that they ask for the sign-in sheet for that day. They also may look, okay, if you have a database of participants, or in the EMR, who is that patient? Do they exist? And so there may be other ways that they could look at that. What's the schedule? When were they, if there's a question and they're matching if that patient was actually there that day. I hope that answered your question. Oh, there's a thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any more? We can stay a minute longer if somebody has a burning question. If not, then thank you very much for your participation and see you again next week. Pam, good luck in your audits.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.